Welcome to the latest episode of Etihad Cargo Connections. I'm your host, Rowan Anderson, and tonight I'm joined by multiple group and listed winning trainer Hugo Palmer. Welcome you, Hugo, to the show. How are you tonight?
I'm really well, thank you. Sorry, I'm just fixing my phone a bit
That's
better.
all right. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. There we are. That's better.
Beautiful. So we'll start at the start. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Edinburgh, and I grew up in the borders of Scotland.
Excellent.
Which is actually where I am now. I'm away from the stable today, so I'm in the frozen north.
That's great. Do you have family there? Do you?
Yeah, my parents are all up here, and that's the thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, my family are from Stirling, so I know
Okay,
the area well. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And what was it about horses and horse racing that got your passion and got you passionate?
It's a very good question. I grew up with horses. I rode as a kid. I did pony club. I was never particularly good at it, but it was an activity that just we all sort of did. My parents rode, and if you'd said to my 10-year-old self that horses and race horses would have been my career, I would have laughed at you, I suppose. Yeah. But about the age of sort of 15, 16, 17, about then I started to get interested in racing. Really, as it was really from a betting point of view. It's quite fun, 16-year-old kids always trying to nick off to the pub, trying to get a beer, trying to get served. And if you'd managed to win a bet on the way there, it was we had a few more pounds in your pocket to spend. And
yeah,
it became very quickly, it became an obsession then. It's sort of by the age of 17, I was sure I wanted to train. I was clearly never going to be a jockey. I think my parents, proud that they are of the way things have gone, I think they'd probably rather I'd gone and made the money to own horses rather than be a trainer. But
yeah. And do you have any family members in the industry, or was it just off that passion?
So my mother's maiden name was Wadham, and her brother Justin, he's a lawyer by trade, and he was company lawyer for Darley. And then in the 90s, for a couple of years, when I think there was an internal dispute and they needed a managing director, he was promoted from sort of in-house lawyer to managing director of Darley. And his wife Lucy trains. She actually dual purpose, but predominantly jumps trainer, based in Newmarket. So there's a sort of connection to it. And certainly when I was at school was just when my aunt was going from what we call in the UK a permit holder to a licensed trainer. Yeah. She was training point-to-pointers and hunter chasers, and she then got her full license when I suppose I was sort of 17 or so. And she was unbelievably patient with me. I used to ring her twice a week to find out how the horses that my parents had a tiny share in were getting on. But that was helpful when I wanted to get some experience, when I wanted to go and work with mares and foals in Newmarket when I left school my year out. My uncle was able to make some phone calls on my behalf, and but yeah, I'm not steeped in family history of it, but there's a connection.
Yeah, and you said you realized you wanted to get into training when you were about 17, and you've reported, like I read on your website as well, when you first started, you started with a small batch, I think, of 11 horses. What were your key goals in becoming a trainer with that small batch of horses, as well as what was that initial stable like?
Oh God, it was. I mean, I've been working in Australia for Gay Waterhouse.
Yeah.
And my visa had expired. And so I left. I believe most of the people in Australia whose visa expired are the Brits. I think that's someone told me.
Yeah.
But so I came home. I came home for the summer. and there was a loose plan that that Gay was going to sponsor me, and I was going to go back and work for her for a longer period. But we hadn't put wheels in motion or anything like that. And I came back, and England was at its absolute best the week that I came back. It was wall to wall sunshine, green, green grass, blue skies, warm May, early May, just before the Guineas meeting at Newmarket. And I went with a friend to the Breeze Up sale there, and it didn't take long, and I'd managed to buy a horse, and I didn't have any license, I didn't have anything, but I think probably the confidence that working for Gay Waterhouse had given me, and also the buoyancy and the enthusiasm that's in the Australian industry. It didn't occur to me remotely that it was a foolhardy idea to buy a horse. And someone said to me, "Well, I thought you wanted to train. You better buy some horses." So I bought this filly and split her up with I took 10% and split her up with nine other people, and that was that. And it's a sort of, I started. Everyone always says I started with a sort of, we had 11 horses that first season. The first morning that I went to work as a trainer, we had 3 horses. We muddled through. And I mean, you said, what was that? What was that like? What was the goal? I mean, if I knew how hard it was going to be, someone said to me, "Right, you've got to go back to the beginning and start again with 11 horses." I'd be like, "Oh God." But I had a small but good and enthusiastic team, and all of us, we worked really, really hard at it. And there are so many cliches about luck. The harder you work, the luckier you get, and all of that. But there is an enormous amount of luck in horse racing. I've lost count of the number of horses that I've bought that I've absolutely loved. You have to love a horse to buy it. You think, "God, yeah, that's the one." And if you're lucky, some of them will be the one. And I was very lucky that first horse was the filly Making Eyes, who won a number of races, and she was a number of firsts for us. And she won 2 stakes races. She was a 25,000 guinea Breeze Up. We sold her, I think, for 165, having won £100,000 in prize money, which I know around the world is not a vast amount of money, but in these parts, and for a first horse, it was she was a great success. And to have that great success early on, people notice you. If your first horse is incredibly moderate, and you win a race, no one really notices. You might get a little one-liner in the Racing Post saying, new trainer has first winner. But when that first winner goes on to win 2 stakes races, and it just, people say, "Oh, that you get noticed."
Yeah. And Making Eyes was my next question. So Making Eyes won your first stakes winner, winning the listed race in France. And you've gone on to train now since then. What have been your highlights for your career so far?
Well, obviously Making Eyes winning in France was incredible, really. She wasn't supposed to run in France. She was supposed to go to the Pipalong Stakes at Pontefract, and it rained and rained and rained and rained and rained, and she was nearly at the racetrack by the time they called the meeting off. And she was a 4-year-old, and that was the last opportunity for 4-year-old and upwards fillies in Europe. That after that race, it all becomes 3-year-old fillies. So I hunted around. There was this race that closed. It was closing in 10 minutes. 10 minutes after they cancelled it, in 7 days' time in Vichy, down and really quite a long way down in France. So the filly, I mean, it was again, I say you need luck. But that all coming together, and we sent two horses down there, sent a 2-year-old down there who ran well without getting black type as well. But that really was an early highlight. Just taking a couple of horses on the road, and that from there everything happened really quite quickly, and a lot of things were a blur. The big milestones. Actibante winning our first group race in 2014 was incredible. And the extraordinary thing was a filly called New Providence that won a Group 3 2 or 3 days later, and we won 2 in a week. The following year, Covert Love was a revelation, really. All of us always liked her. She was weak as a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's always, people on the outside of training and of racing, they think that those of us on the inside really know, and that we know what's going to happen, and we know what ability a horse is going to end up with. It's so far from the truth. We hope, we try, we know what we're trying to achieve. But if we knew, the game would be so much easier.
Yeah,
I remember
so much easier.
when Covert Love won her maiden, it all went wrong, and she wasn't a very good race, but she won it quite well. William Buick rode her, and he got off her and he said, "This filly's all right. I think she'll get some black type, but I doubt she'll win one." And she finished the year having won 2 Group 1s. Obviously, winning that Irish Oaks was a highlight. I've always, and the following year with Galileo Gold winning the 2,000 guineas in St James's Palace was a highlight. But I think probably the highlight was Covert Love winning the Prix de l'Opera on Arc Day in Paris. She was ridden by the late Pat Smullen, who became a good friend, and we had some great days together. He gave a lot of horses some magnificent rides, but he won't have given many better rides than the one he gave her that day.
Yeah.
And she was an extraordinary story, really. She was bred by some friends of mine, who she was RNA'd in the ring at Goffs as a yearling. I liked her, didn't have an order, and I sort of went and begged and said, "Look, can I take her home and we can work something out?" And I think, the truth be told, I was only allowed to do so because I was prepared to pay for her to get across the Irish Sea back to England. I think they kept trying to sell her after that, but we got her syndicated, and she was owned. It's only £3,000 a share, and when she was favourite that day, or joint favourite in Paris. She was owned by people who lived all over the world. People had flown in from Hong Kong and South Africa and Ireland, and we'd got the whole team was there, and she won in a pulsating finish of heads, and was just not getting denied. And I think to be surrounded by friends, surrounded by everything on that day in Paris, I think that probably the highlight. But great moments since then too, obviously with Galileo Gold, and particularly 2001 Galileo having Ebro River. He was obviously a son of Galileo Gold, that we had Galileo Gold's first winner, his first stakes winner, and his first Group 1 winner. Obviously all being the same horse, but that was really fun.
Yeah, and just the last question about the training, your career so far in terms of at home. Last year you took over Manor House Stables, amazing facility, as we're all aware. What did taking over that stable and that facility mean to yourself in furthering your career, and how did that opportunity come to pass?
Well, the opportunity came to pass. Michael Owen has been a friend of mine now for a number of years, and for whatever reason, he and his previous trainer Tom Dascombe were struggling to find a way forwards, and so they parted company. And he was looking for a new trainer, and he asked me if I'd do it, and I said I wouldn't, and he said, I thought you'd say that. Can you help me find someone? Can you help me persuade people? So I spoke to a couple of young trainers who were doing very well, who Michael and I thought would fit the bill, and for one reason or another, the two or three that we spoke to weren't keen to do it, and it was just over a year ago now. It was early New Year. I was where I am now. I was in Scotland and away from Newmarket, and Michael rang me and said, "Look, you're meant to be my mate. You dismissed it out of hand. You've never even given it proper consideration. Will you please just go through the motions of thinking about it?" So I did, and it went from there, really. What it means to me, furthering my career, Newmarket's a wonderful place to train horses, but I was always frustrated that it wasn't mine. Not that Manor House is mine, but it's my name above the door, and it's mine to be in charge of. And there's a real, actually, having trained in a centre, there's a real joy to having your own place. And Michael and I have got great plans for it. We want to build it, it's a very, very exciting place to be, and I'm loving it.
And we'll now turn the conversation to the UAE side of things. You're preparing Flaming Rib for this season. Could you tell us a little bit about him, as well as what races you've got him penciled in for?
Yeah, absolutely. So since you've emailed me, Flaming Rib's plans have changed a little bit. So,
okay.
But as a horse, I'm pretty sure he is the best of Ribchester's progeny. I didn't know him as a 2-year-old, but he was a successful 2-year-old for Tom Dascombe, winning a listed race in very soft ground. And when I arrived at Manor House, Michael said to me, "Oh, we hope this might be a Guineas horse." And I said, "Right, okay." And so, well, look, he probably wants a bit of soft ground. Should we maybe think about the French Guineas and maybe the Greenham and see if he can stay? So we went to the Greenham, and we, after months and weeks of training him to settle and will he stay? Will he stay? We went to the Greenham, and he was too keen and didn't stay. And James Doyle said, "Look, he's just so fast." So he dropped back to 5 and won at Chester, and he was then second in the Sandy Lane, second in the Commonwealth Cup, and I think sort of right up there in the top 2 or 3 3-year-old sprinters last year. He was a very sort of immature looking, light and narrow, and now as a 4-year-old, he's really become a man. He looks like the sprinter that he's developed and grown into, and his work this winter has been exciting. The ultimate target really is the Alcoz Sprint. Is it the Alcoz Sprint? Yes, the Alcoz Sprint on World Cup night. And it's how we get there. The sprint in Saudi is obviously very appealing. He's been entered in that, and I think that just purely from a financial point of view, it's worth $1.5 million, the same as the Alcoz Sprint. So I think that's probably where then the race on Super Saturday, the Nadal Sheba Sprint, I think it's called, was going to be the route that we went. But I got an email this week that the Dukhan Sprint in Doha has had its prize fund raised
They
from, I
raised.
think it used to be from 100,000 to 400,000,
Yeah.
and that's on the 18th. So, provided he comes to hand quick enough, if he weren't to go to Saudi, Saudi would still be the priority. We'd like to go to Saudi and then Dubai, but if
Yeah.
he weren't to get into Saudi, then just from simple mathematics, I think we'd be better going to Qatar for 400,000 than to Super Saturday for 250,000.
Yeah.
It's staggering the money that's available to these
Yeah,
horses
certainly.
in the Middle East.
Yeah. And is he still in the UK or has he arrived in Dubai?
No, he's still in the UK.
Yeah.
He's not. We're not. It's always the thing, isn't it? You can't dance every dance.
Yeah, most definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
and so he's still in the UK, and he'll travel out for the races that we're talking about. But the Doha race, the Saudi race, and World Cup night are all invitational races where he'd probably be only out of the country for 8 or 9 days
Yeah.
on each occasion. So I think we'd do that, and then see how that goes, and see what other options there are. Obviously, there are great options in the UK, and with a lot of last year's sprinters, Naval Crown, Minzal, Perfect Power, I think Double or Bubble, Alcohol Free. Obviously, she's not retired, but she's in Australia, and I've no idea whether she'll be coming back to England to race again. But a lot of the leading sprinters, our own Dubai legend, unfortunately, a lot of the leading sprinters from last year have been retired. So hopefully there are opportunities for him in the UK. The 2-year-olds Blackbeard and Persian Force as well. So, but there's an awful lot of money around the world, depending on how his winter and early spring campaign goes. They've pretty sure. Am I right in saying they've reinstigated the Singapore Sprint as well?
Yes.
In May? I think that's $1 million race that could be on his agenda as well. So it's the exciting thing with these horses is that there's a lot of money on offer around the world.
And is he the only horse you're preparing for the UAE, Saudi, and Qatar?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Yep.
Our other leading sprinter is Brad the Brief. He really he wants to get his toe into the ground a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I just thought I know the ground is meant to be beautiful in Saudi, but I kind of thought just preparing a soft ground horse for the Middle East wasn't the most sensible thing to do.
Yeah. And so how large is the stable at Manor House currently?
We've got we will be 120 when they're all in. We've still got half a dozen older horses just coming to the end of a winter break, and we've still got some yearlings, still 2-year-olds now to come in. But we'll be about 120 all told, which is about a dozen or so less than last year. And we've got ambitions to train more. We obviously want things to go well. The dream, the ambition is to build a powerhouse stable where we are in Cheshire. But 120 horses to go to war with for 2023 is a really good number, and we've got some lovely looking 2-year-olds, but which trainer hasn't at this point in time. But obviously with those older horses, I think we've got quite a lot of well handicapped 3-year-olds, or just turned 3 as well. So hopefully we can have an enjoyable season.
And you just mentioned the two that you had, talking about the 2 sprinters that you had in the stable. Are there any other stars of the stable, so to speak, that punters should keep an eye on? Either that, or as well as you mentioned, the new crop of 2-year-olds and yearlings that are coming in that are showing potential.
Well, obviously it's very, very early days
most definitely.
for our 2-year-olds. And as is the way in the Northern Hemisphere. I know it happens a great deal in the Southern Hemisphere as well, but the value of our horses is so much in the sale of them, and in the breeding shed as well. So from our leading lights last year, Ever Given, Mr. McCann, they were both sold very well. Mr. McCann's already won a Group 2 this winter in Bahrain, and Ebra River and Dubai Legend, both stakes winners for us last year, have retired to studs. So it is very much, back to the beginning, really, in many ways. But it's great to have Flaming Rib and to have Brad the Brief as well. I think we've got some really nice 3-year-olds coming through. There's 2 colts, both by Lope de Vega, who both finished third on debut, Order of Malta and Imperial Ace. I think they'll turn into really nice middle distance horses in the spring. And we've got a very smart filly called Stenton Glider, who won her only start at Chester. She beat a 5-1 on shot of Juddmonts, who had been about a length and a half behind Commissioning, who I think is either the Guinea's favourite or the Guinea's second favourite, and we beat it on debut fairly convincingly. It was frustrating. She got struck into not long after that, and so we weren't able to run her again. So she's just had the one start, but she's going to have a 1,000 guineas prep, and we'll see where we get to with her. I think she's pretty exciting.
And you mentioned as well briefly regarding sales, and as I said, I'm based in Australia. I'm in Brisbane, so the Magic Million sales are on currently. What do you look for at sales in terms of quality, or description, or characteristics of stablemates?
It's a very hard question, to be honest, because I've always wanted to have a balanced stable. I've always wanted to have, sprinters and milers and stayers. And in Rajinski and Solent Gateway and Sophie, we've got horses that stay, distances that you wouldn't even see in Australia. It's sort of 30, what's the Cesarewitch? 3,800 meters, is it? And we've also got sprinters, so particularly have a type. But I like horses to have a nice outlook. I like them to have a nice eye. I like them to look like the sort of animal that wants to be on your side, that wants to work with you, that wants to please you, and to have a nice outlook, and to be forward going, to be athletic. I don't think they need to walk too well. Sometimes horses that walk too well can end up being slow. They move too well. They spend too much time moving and not actually going anywhere. I think depth of girth is important, and I think people can be very picky about faults in legs and actually leave behind very talented horses because they're worried about it being a bit towed this way or that way, or I think as long as a trainer can look at a horse's legs and feel that that's got a decent, as good a chance as any of staying sound, I don't think they have to be sort of immaculately correct. I think a horse's outlook and his character and athleticism are much more important than that. But just try to find a balanced horse and try to produce a balanced stable of all different types of horses.
Yeah. And just the final question, you've been passionate about horses, pretty much your entire life. You, at age 17, you knew you wanted to get into training side of things, that great experience with the Queen of Australian racing and Gay Waterhouse. What are some vital and important lessons that you've learned along the way in your training career that have set you up to progress and, always get better? And as you said, with your horses, continue to go to war.
Gosh, I don't know. I think the greatest thing I learned from Gay Waterhouse is that horses, it sounds a stupid thing to say, and it should be very obvious, but the horses have to be fit.
Yeah.
And her horses are always very fit. Fit horses take their races better. I think it is a trap that you could see people falling into, that horses are not fit enough. They don't take their races well. But also, I think another thing I really learned from Gay was, and it's something that I've tried to, afraid of failure.
Yeah.
We've won a lot of races with horses that weren't favorites. And again, I think it's always worth having a go, not blindly, but if if I've seen something I've liked at home, if I've been impressed by something, pleased by something, think, oh, this is actually quite good. I don't think you have to prove that it's that good before actually having a go at the highest level. And I remember something David Loader said to me, who obviously trained for a period of time very successfully. He said to me, I mean, it must have been 2013, so I've been training 2 years, and he said, how many group races have you won? And I said, oh, I haven't, but we've won a couple of listed races and the stable's beginning to grow. And he said, that's pathetic. You should have won group races. Next time you have a 2-year-old that you like and it wins its maiden well, chuck it in a group race. You'd be amazed how often they win. So we got to the next year, and as I said earlier, we managed to win 2 in a week. And it's I thought that was very good advice, and it stood me in good stead.
Yeah. And it's just, as you said, not being afraid to fail, and just taking one step, forward, and running with the tide, pretty much. So
I think not being afraid to fail, I think in everything in life is key. People tend to only notice the winners; they don't notice the losers. So it doesn't matter if you lose, and you're gonna win more times by taking part than you are if you don't.
That's it. Thanks so much for joining us tonight on 80 Hard Cargo Connections, Hugo. It's been really good.
Absolute pleasure.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, mate.